So having said all that, unless there's any questions, we'll move on to Dave Daniels, who is our spotlight presenter this morning. He's the warm-up act for Dave Shavin.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, again, good morning to everybody. Thanks for your time. I'll try to be brief and see if you have any questions. But like I think everybody in this group, I'd like to fashion myself as a lifelong learner. The primary reason that I've tried to do that is just leadership development, always looking for better ways to be more effective with the people that I work with. And about 3 years ago, I became a certified coach of the IDI assessment. And what the heck does that stand for? It stands for Intercultural Development Inventory, thus the shorted acronym of IDI. What is the IDI and why would you want to participate? Jim, is it possible to put that flyer up?
Yeah, it's coming up right now. I just opened it.
So while Jim is getting that up, the IDI helps leadership. And if I focus initially with the leadership, specifically the CEO or the president of the company, and what we try to do with the leadership group is to try to identify how inclusive is the organization. I believe it's an essential first step for a leadership team when heading into the D&I space. It's a neat continuum of 5 points, and the assessment only takes about 15 minutes. And what I do, once I am the administrator of this, not only the administrator of the assessment, but I'm also the executive coach. And I have the opportunity to do a one-on-one debrief with a person who has taken this individualized and very confidential assessment and walk them through the results. And again, it only takes about 15 minutes to take the assessment. The first feedback session is around an hour, and I help them understand their results. And if you could leave right there, Jim, that's a good spot. Thank you. What we do, there's a continuum of 5 points along the continuum. And it allows you to be able to see, first of all, what you see in the upper right part of the screen, the self-perception of inclusion. That's how you see yourself in being inclusive. And again, it will put you on one of the 5 points on the continuum. Then there's the actual inclusion orientation based on these very psychometric validated processes. It will tell you and contrast how you see yourself versus where you truly are. And usually, as you see in this example, there's a bit of a gap. And I know there was for me, and I've done well over 200 of these coaching sessions. And I've only found one situation where this was reversed. And it's an opportunity to say, okay, why is that? And it's an opportunity to really dig deep and delve into what you see versus where you're at today. And we spend a lot of time looking at things. As you can see, there's some actionable reports. We put together a personal development plan. We can do this, and I always start out individually with a person. And again, this is for many, 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 I would say actually most, this is a very tough subject to talk about, especially publicly. And so these conversations, again, are very individual. They're very confidential, and I hope to establish, and what I've done most of the time is being able to establish a very confidential and comfortable setting for the executive to talk about what they really see and what they really feel. And we get really real on these, and there is no topic that's not discussable. And so I've had some excellent conversations, and what I do through that first debrief session is I help that individual set an individual development plan to try to progress with regards to their understanding of differences and also valuing those differences. And a lot of times people say, well, okay, that's a cultural thing, and it may be, but as you think back, I'm pretty sure that everybody here on this call today is probably taken the Myers-Briggs at least once. And when you think about these types of assessments, the Myers-Briggs was really the forerunner of many different types of assessments. And I would suggest it was really the first, although they didn't fashion it that way, it was the first D&I assessment, because as you all probably well know, it allows you to come into one of the quadrants, and then when done effectively, you come together collectively as a group with a trained and well functioning facilitator that helps you understand those differences. But most importantly, from a leadership perspective, how do you bring the best out of everybody? And that's what this is all about, is bringing the best out of everybody. And as a leader, once you want that in your hip pocket, and this is a way to look at it in a way that you probably have not looked at your leadership style in the past. And it can be, again, very, very, very powerful. We do it as an individual basis as we grow it within an organization, within a particular area. For example, the executive team. If the team agrees to, once we get 8 or more people, then we can look at some group dynamics as well. But that's really up to the group. If I've done my job properly, then a vast majority of the time the group would like to get together and see what this looks like, much like the Myers-Briggs, how they can leverage that, not only individually, but collectively as a group. So it's something that I do. I'm partnered with another woman, a younger woman. I thought it was important, being chronically age challenged here. I thought it was important to have somebody that was younger and fit those needs, because many small and mid-sized businesses, emerging businesses have younger leaders as well. And so what I do is I come in to help the CEO become comfortable with it. I offer a greatly reduced price for the CEO to take the assessment, and I encourage them to pick one other key influencer in their organization to take the assessment as well. Now, the CEO is not going to see that other person's results. Again, these are always individual and confidential, but I want them to talk about the process and see if it makes sense for their organization. And once we seed it into the organization, we get pretty aggressive on the pricing. I'm not out to make, to be very candid, a ton of money. I just think it's an important part of professional development and personal development. So I come in, and generally it's $250 for the taking the assessment, the administration of the assessment, the initial feedback session, and then 90 days later, I come back and do a second session with them. And then I always hold myself open for individual conversations. I always like to have people understand the meter's not running. There's an opportunity to talk, because there's things that pop up. Again, they can be very tough to handle when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And I want people to feel comfortable that they have a resource that they can turn to and know that they'll get some hopefully effective perspective, great advice, and an opportunity to share very confidentially and personally what they're going through and be able to provide that additional support. So generally it's $250 for what I've just described per person. For the 2 people that I do, the CEO and the one other, I do both for $250. And if the organization, which is about 75% of the time in my track record, is that they see the value of it, then they expand it. And I have a pricing model for that gets pretty aggressive as well. So that's the IDI.
Well, thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave?
Yeah, I do. Dave, sounds like you're working with smaller companies
I am
these days.
Yes.
How's that going? I don't know how small you're talking about, but are you finding the smaller companies open to, receptive, getting it? What are those experiences like for you?
It's a great question. So one of the things, the reason I try to price my consulting services very aggressively, especially this past year and going into this year, I understood that small to mid-sized businesses were focused on business continuity. Everybody gets that, right? You got to be sure that you're here tomorrow, and you're doing that not only for yourself but for all your employees as a good and effective leader. So I understood that. And when I'm able to come in and describe the benefits and how it can fit and strategically fit into what they're doing, and become a critical part of their strategy, not only business continuity, but then growing beyond that. And then, to be very candid, sharing the aggressive pricing that I do with it. They've been very receptive to it. Again, my conversion rate's about 75%.
One other question, are you working, have you been working around the country or just locally?
It's another great question. I do have some, I have quite a good local business, but it's expanding beyond. It's like anything else, word of mouth. I have a pretty strong presence on LinkedIn. I do a lot of blogging on LinkedIn, and that's generated some interest. So I've got about a half a dozen clients across the country. And with these types of opportunities and in technology that we have today, it works out really, really well. I don't have to. In the past, I would feel very strongly, I did, about being face to face with you. Well, today, we all have become a lot more comfortable. We've had to become a lot more comfortable with these types of settings. And it's really pushed this whole format or approach forward, and people are much more comfortable doing something on a Zoom, Microsoft Office, those types of things. It's become a pretty comfortable conversation. You can still see each other, you can see the dynamics, and I think that's an important part of it.
Terrific. Any other questions for Dave?
Yeah, and just one other thing, if I could, Jim, I take a very common sense approach. There's to this whole D&I concept, and it's an interesting, one of the blog I'm working on right now is, can a Republican believe in D&I? And I know it's going to, I think, to generate some interesting conversations. And I think when I say Republican, a conservative, and I take a very, very practical approach. I am not out there with a lot of the fringe ideas out there. I don't agree with those. It's a practical approach that's going to make a difference in your leadership style, your leaders in the organization style, and help make your organization the best it can be.
Super.